Hey, welcome to lesson 4, learning target 5 on in this unit 5 on organization of data. Before we get into stats, this is lesson 4 is on observations versus experiments. And so remember, this unit is all about collecting or how to collect data and talking about it. And so today we start talking about two ways to actually collect data. You can actually if you're going to collect your own primary data, there's one way is to survey people, but another way is to actually do some observations or experiments. And so we're going to compare those today. So after unit tests, the teacher collects homework and records how much was completed. He then analyzes if the amount of homework had an impact on the mark. Another teacher has two classes on the same course. For one unit, she assigns no homework questions to one class and assigns 30 minutes of homework a night to another class. Assuming second class diligently did their homework each night, she then analyzes the results of the unit test to see if the homework had an impact on the mark. Describe the differences in the studies. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? So you can clearly see the differences. The one teacher is actually just watching to see if homework is completed. The other one is actually conducting what we call an experiment to see if homework was completed. We're going to see the different parts of the experiment here in this lesson, and they're going to be evident in this question as well. Advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, advantages for the first one is a little bit less work. For the second one, the advantages are that you can clearly see a difference between the two types, and so we're going to call these a control group and an experimental group. A disadvantage for the second one is it can be a little bit unethical to say, okay, I'm going to play with students' marks this way. So that's something we keep in mind. Learning target 5, I know the difference between an observational study and experimental study. I can design a study that is observational or experimental and know the advantages and disadvantages of each and when each is more appropriate. So observational studies, researchers look at situations that are already occurring and try to make conclusions from those observations. So they're just looking at what's already happening and trying to just really studying what's already happening. For example, a researcher might compare two groups of people, one with members who exercise and another with members who don't, to see if one group is healthier than the other. And so we actually just seek out these people and study these people into the two groups. There are two types of observational studies. You can do an observational study over time, longitudinal. Researchers measure the same variables over a long period of time. It could often be years or even decades. Or you could do a cross-sectional study, type of observation where researchers measure variables at one specific point in time. So those are the two types of observational studies, longitudinal and cross-sectional. Experimental studies try to determine cause and effect by really trying to control for one of the variables to see what impact control for all the variables, but control for one to see what impact does it have on the other variable. In experimental studies, researchers control what is going on and make inferences based on those controls. For example, a researcher might randomly choose two similar groups and have members of one group perform rigorous exercise once a day for 30 days, while members of the other group continue with a normal lifestyle. Researchers would then measure the fitness of both groups at the end of the month. Okay. The treatment group is the participants in the experiment who receive the treatment, so they would be the ones that actually do the exercise. The control group is the ones that don't receive the treatment. They're compared to the treatment group. Experimental studies have good control. The effective ones have good control, randomize the members of the group, and try to have a similar demographic makeup in each group. So each group is pretty much the same, and they try to randomize people so that they can really see what effect that the variable has. And the control that they want to do, as many of the aspects of the experiment need to be controlled as possible, researchers know what caused it. So that's one of the key things in experimental studies, is this element of control. There's also this element of randomization. To have a valid study where it represents the population, we need to have we have to make sure that when groups are chosen, everybody's randomized, so that there's no bias, or bias is limited. Replication is the idea of reliable. So these ideas of reliable and valid just keep coming up. Even though the groups are random, researchers repeat an experiment. They should be able, in similar makeup, so that the changes from one group to another are easier to detect. So that each of the groups are pretty. Each group is random, but if there is something that's causing a change, we can find out that very easily. A couple discussion points. A researcher interviews people as they leave the gym and find that they get fewer colds compared to people who do not go to the gym. Why is this an observational study? They're not actually doing an experiment. They're just really asking people, and they're just really researching. What could be done to turn this into an experimental study? You can actually have people perform exercises and see over time. Remember, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it over time, even years, to see if exercise does impact, or going to the gym does impact getting fewer colds. And so you can just randomize people and have them exercise. That's not that easily said than done, but that's what makes it experimental. You want to make that control group and that treatment group. A botanist is studying the effects of acidity on rate of growth. She grows one group of plants using water with neutral pH. She grows another using water with increasingly acidic levels, which are control and experimental. So you can see this is experimental study. The control group is the group with the neutral pH. The experimental group is the one with the increasingly acidic pH level. She's changing the levels of the pH. Why do you think groups of plants were used rather than one single plant for each pH level? It's really the idea that, one single plant might have something in it. It's just like people. We want to have more trials, more choices there, so that we can see the effects. Clinical trials often use placebos to help determine if medication is working. Search for studies that have used placebos. Find at least one where the placebo helped to show the medication worked, and one where it did not. And I'd invite you to do that. And so this placebo effect is a famous thing, and so oftentimes placebos sometimes show the medication works. Sometimes they just show that any kind of medication might work. It would just trick the brain into thinking it would work. Some practice questions. So just want you to work through those questions from the textbook. Design an observational study that would analyze the effect that energy drink consumption has on marks. So that's observational. What are the drawbacks of the study? Would an experimental study be better? How would that be carried out? And so I want you to think about this idea, energy drink consumption affecting on marks, any drawbacks, advantages, disadvantages. What would it look like observationally? What would it look like experimentally? And design an experimental study that would analyze the effect that protein has on athletic ability. That's experiment. Would an observational study be better? Okay, that's basically it.